This is part D of the France-Germany talk, which I've had to re-record, hence my different shirt. And it's about what makes the relationship between France and Germany count in the EU. And I want to talk about three aspects. The first is a very simple one, population. France and West Germany represented over 60% of the population of the original 6 members of the EEC, and currently about 1/3 of the EU 27 and half the Euro area GDP. That's a very considerable weight between them. Point 2 is more complicated. I think it's useful to conceive of France and Germany as being effective in part because they're a union of opposites. They don't have identical ways of thinking on every subject, in many ways quite the opposite. Those opposite points of view are expressed, to start with, firstly in notions of sovereignty. France has often been called a Jacobin country, very keen on centralising power in Paris, disinclined on the whole to pass power downwards to regions or, with certain reservations, upwards to Europe. Whereas Germany, having experienced well within living memory military occupation, started on the European enterprise from a position of limited sovereignty to start with, and grew from occupation into a federal country. It meant, therefore, that Germans have felt relatively comfortable about sharing sovereignty, about sovereignty being located in the Länder, in the federal government, and yes, in Europe, rather than concentrating it all in the capital city. And for Germany, the integration process coincided with the recovery of the sovereign status lost in 1945. Second distinct point of view, the point of the Cold War. For France, Europe was a sort of escape from a bipolar world. For Germany, on the other hand, dependence on the United States for security was seen as constant. Then too, there are economic distinctions between the two countries. France has been rather inclined to dirigisme, that is to say, state intervention in the economy. In Germany, on the other hand, ordoliberalism has been the economic model of the post-war period. That is, a form of capitalism in which the state's expected to play a regulatory role and firms to accept social responsibilities, but where the state doesn't actually run things directly, and there's not much room for state ownership or planning on the French style in the post-war years. Fourthly, there are monetary differences between the two countries. The French have traditionally been rather tolerant of inflation, whereas Germany, having experienced hyperinflation after 1919 and currency collapse after 1945, has a certain obsession with price stability that was built into the founding mission of the Bundesbank and led to the steadily rising value of the Deutschmark. Fifthly, they have been differentiated in respect to their attitudes to trade. France has tended to be rather more inclined to protectionism, especially for agriculture, than Germany, which has always been keen on expanding into world markets. It was often said that France in the partnership was the political heavyweight and Germany the economic heavyweight, or for Willy Brandt, Germany was an economic giant but a political dwarf. Thus, it's been said that Germany needed France to disguise its strength and France needed Germany to disguise its weakness. And the Franco-German relationship was for a long time the absolutely axial relationship in the EU. So they might have common goals, but different positions about achieving it. and this is crucial, the compromises that France and Germany reached on their different goals had to be reached on quite a broad basis, coming from rather different viewpoints. And because that was the case, there was usually room to fit other states' preference in to a great big European package, reducing transaction costs, albeit sometimes at the price of side payments to European partners that is characteristic of European packages. The third element of the Franco-German relationship which makes it important is the Franco-German Treaty and the institutionalization of the special relationship. It involves the promise of consultation on foreign affairs and defence, even if that doesn't always work or produce harmony, for example, on Yugoslavia, where it really didn't succeed. Regular meetings between defence ministers every 3 months, military chiefs of staff every 2 months, the president and chancellor at least every 6 months. Then there's been a terrific programme of youth and cultural exchanges, which involved 7 million young people in the first 40 years of its existence. And then further arrangements, including the Franco-German Economic Council and the Defence and Security Council in 1988, and then joint full government meetings in the École Nationale d'Administration, opening its doors to German students, and then really the sort of routine work that always goes on between France and Germany before any European summit to prepare to try and achieve a common position. Of course, there isn't always a common position, but at least the possibility of bad surprises at European summits is absolutely minimized. And we know, of course, that the 1963 treaty was complemented on 22nd January 2019 by the Aachen or Aix-la-Chapelle Treaty, which came into force on the 22nd of January 2020, a fairly cautious treaty, but which aimed to build on the foundations of the 1963 model, notably in the area of security cooperation. Now, there are limitations to the importance of the treaty. At the highest level, it's probable that informal confidence between the leaders is more important than treaty provisions. And we've seen that in a number of cases, there were conflictual relationships at the top. So too, we must be clear about the limitations of the treaty. It doesn't involve any institutionalized power in the European Union. Neither France nor Germany makes rules for the others. Neither of them distributes money except indirectly through the EU budget. So the Franco-German Treaty, yes, it's certainly important institutionally, but it certainly doesn't explain everything. Just to finish up on D then, D4. How powerful a partnership is this? Some people, particularly people rather hostile to it, have taken the view that it's all powerful, that really the whole European project is run by France and Germany, and what they want, they get, and that all forward steps have always depended on Franco-German initiatives. This isn't really true. The Rome Treaty certainly wasn't inspired by France and not too much by Germany, whereas the small countries were actually quite important. People like Paul-Henri Spaak were quite important in taking the initiative for the Rome Treaty. It is more accurate, perhaps, to say that France and Germany can block what they really don't want, and they do have a capacity for initiative that no other pair of countries have, so that if they really don't do anything or don't want something to happen, then not much does get done. There aren't really a lot of alternative motors within Europe. Which means, of course, that in today's divided Europe, the demise of the partnership, the disappearance of the partnership, would almost certainly fatally weaken the European Union. Okay.